All right, so what we want to do today is we want to go over getting into Maya, using some of the hotkeys. You'll find that from Cinema into Maya is not too terrible of a transition. There are, again, like I said before, enough stuff that it's comfortable, but also enough stuff that is off that'll kind of upset us. But we'll get used to them, okay? If you haven't started up your Maya, you can go to the window key, type in Maya, and load it up. And then if you do have your stuff that you're saving, you're working on your P drive or you're working on your thumb drive, make sure you have that folder set up somewhere where you're going to be saving your files. On my computer, I have a P drive, I have my Sarcona folder, and then I have a 2540 folder right there. And that's where I'm going to be saving all my stuff. At the end of the day, make sure before you leave, you've saved your files, you've backed them up, okay? I assume at this level we've all gone through that before in some other classes, so you kind of know how to save files and back them up, all right? If you were able to watch the interface video, great, and the other videos, great. I'm going to do a brief overview here just so you can see it again. If not, make sure you watch those things. The more you're familiar with this interface, the better you're going to be. When I learned Maya years ago, there was basically the only books that were out were the manuals. And so we would literally read through the manuals and it would say, this menu does this menu does that, and it was very matter of fact. We didn't have this kind of stuff. But from every single software I've ever used, this is the best interface that I've ever come across. Very expandable. The only thing that I realized today that the newest version of Maya will do is if I hit a certain hotkey, it'll crash. Okay, on your computer it doesn't, but on my computer it does. So at the very top is our main menu bar. One thing that we will find is that this menu bar here is not one that as animators we're going to be working in. Maya has a bunch of different toolbars. Our main toolbar we'll work in is the animation one, okay? And this is where it's very overwhelming because there's literally an unlimited number of features and customizations and things that you can go through to get Maya the way you want it to be, all right? So I'm going to switch this from modeling menu to animation menu. Okay. Now, my hotkeys are right now set up for my recording software, but F2, 3, 4, 5 will also switch you through or cycle you through those different animation menus and so on. And unless they've removed it, holding the H key and clicking, yeah, they removed that. Yep. That used to be a hotkey that would let us do that too. So I'm going to stay in the animation menu. This changes these up here. Okay. Now, I'll tell you that as you get comfortable with doing anything in Maya, we rely less and less and less on anything that is built in. So any of these things that are up here, we rely on very little as we get more comfortable with the software. Think of like Photoshop or Illustrator or any of these tools. Usually there's a good handful, maybe 10 or 15 things that you're constantly using all day long. Maybe once in a while you pick up something different, but those 10 or 15 tools you're constantly using. Maya is exactly like that too. There's about 10 or 15 tools we'll use all day long. And then after the day is up, we may have touched one more or two more, but most of the time we're right inside that 10 to 15 tool area. We could actually get rid of this entire interface. I'm not going to do it because that's the one that crashes my screen. We can get rid of this entire interface, make our own bar, and have just those 10 to 15 tools right there. So that way we don't have to go up here to here to here to find and click through a bunch of stuff. Everything can be right there. Also, if we do find that we like a certain menu, you'll notice at the very top I can click it and actually pull that off. And now this is a floating menu, okay, which is really awesome because it allows us to have these things set up. As you get more comfortable, you'll be utilizing that second screen, whether it's for your graph editor or your tools or whatever it is. Okay, so the menu bars up here, we'll get through that. These things we'll get through, as we need them. Right now we don't. This is the shelf. In the video I show how to make your own shelf, which is using certain buttons that we'll use all the time, like deleting the history, centering our pivot, freezing transforms, the outliner, and so on. Okay. Again, it just allows us ease of getting into the software and using it, the tools that we need right away. This is my outliner. So if you want to see your outliner, on the left side, you'll see this little button on the bottom. You can click on that, and that will pop open your outliner if it's not there. Thinking of Cinema, we basically had this area on the top right where it listed all of our objects in our scene. Maya doesn't work like that. Very rarely do we need to go through and click objects and do that kind of thing. Usually, all of our work is going to happen here. So this is as close to that object area as we would need, because it basically is just going to list the items for us. If we have in our first one, we'll have a ball, we'll have a ground, let's say. So in here, we'll see a ball, we'll see a ground, and then we'll just kind of leave them there. We won't interact with them really. We won't do anything with them. Any selecting we do will be out here. It's only when we get into heavier scenes that we might be clicking through this to grab exactly what we need, okay? Or if we're organizing something, we'll organize it over there. On the far right side, this is the channel box. We will be doing a lot of stuff here. I'm going to show you inside Cinema what that looks like in Cinema version. I had it open and then I closed it because I clicked the wrong button. All right, so if I were to click a cube or something and I went to coordinates, this right here is the equivalent of the channel box inside of Maya, okay? So we move, we rotate, we scale. Those two things are very similar. Now, in Cinema, I use this area very rarely. If I'm setting a keyframe, yes. If I, need to scale something up a specific area, yes. But I rarely use it. In Maya, however, I'm constantly going to be inside this area. As I create stuff, as I move it, as I scale it, as I animate it, I'm always going to be over here, okay? There's a lot more functionality here than there is there, okay? Down here we have layers. So in Cinema, we had layers there, kind of hidden behind these attributes. The layers work very similar. They're just for show. They're just for us to keep our stuff organized so that we can make a ball, make a ground, put them on different layers, hide one if we need to, render one, if not see it, whatever, okay? So again, organizational more than something that's going to help us, in our scene-wise. Down here is our time slider. So that's going to work just like Cinema's has a time slider. The only sucky thing about Maya is maybe they'll add it in 2020. You can't click on keyframes and just move them. They'll show the keyframes, but if we want to grab them, we have to go into other areas to do it. So that kind of sucks. We still have a work area, so that's what this is here. And this is the same kind of bar as we would have there. That's the work area inside Cinema. Here's our 24 frames a second. And then these are just some other stuff that eventually we'll get to, okay? So that's essentially all we would need for this kind of thing. You'll also notice that there are multiple shelves here. So you'll see this huge list of shelves depending on what you might be doing. You may want to jump to those. I rely very little on other shelves besides mine. You can add a million different icons here if you want. You can add your own menus and everything if you wanted. I'm just going to leave it as is, as this is. Moving around. In Cinema, you use the Alt key, you use the left mouse, the middle mouse, and the right mouse, right? That's how we did all these. Those are still the same, okay? When we create something, we're going to go to Create Polygons, and in this case, we'll just make a sphere. So go on your computer, create polygon, and then sphere. Yep. And then you can work on, just to get refreshed, work on rotating around, zooming in, panning your camera. You'll also notice that the F key is your framing key. In Cinema, it was some random key. I don't even remember what it was. I can't remember what it was. I'm in Maya mode. It was O. That's what it was. Thank you. In Cinema, it was O. In Maya, it's F. F for frame, which makes sense. Now, the reason we would need to know that is sometimes we will get lost inside Maya, it's very easy to, just like Cinema. Then we can hit F, pops us right back. Cool. So we have to be, as animators, we have to be a little bit OCD in how we animate things. One of the things we like to do or need to do is that sphere sitting below the grid. That grid is basically our ground plane. So we need that grid, or that sphere, to sit on the ground plane. Okay. So this is where you would use the channel box. I'm going to go to the Translate Y. I'm going to click here and hit 1, and then hit Enter. And that will pop my sphere right on top of the ground. Okay. Now you might have, and I look around and see this, you might have something that looks like this, or something that looks like that. Okay. So this is just another tab that's on the right side of your screen called the Attribute Editor. I recommend pulling the Attribute Editor off and then closing it, and then you won't have to worry about accidentally opening that. Otherwise, you can just click the channel box and then click the sphere, and then you'll see that stuff. The Attribute Editor is great. Many things we can do inside of it. Right now, we don't need to touch anything. Okay. Which part? Just click on the item and then go to Translate Y and type in 1. Now, just so we can see this, the left object is a polygon, the right object is a NURBS. Okay, NURBS is a term very specific to math modeling. Maya has it. In Cinema, they don't have a name for it here. They have sphere. Oops, pull this out. When I hit C and then I look at the grid lines, you can see that they have all of these edges like this, which look very similar to this one. Okay, so in Cinema, we're pretty much always working with polygons. Maya has this ability to do polygons or NURBS. Okay, NURBS, if you want what they stands for, non-uniform rational B-splines, basically mathematical surfaces. You can think of them like CAD surfaces. You can punch holes in them. They're very cool, but we don't really need them, okay, for what we're doing. I'm going to just delete my NURB sphere, but I just wanted you to see that there is a difference. One of the main reasons for that is if I were to create a NURBS cube, even though this would look like a regular polygon cube, it's actually made up of separate pieces versus being one solid cube, okay? So stuff that you may encounter as you're creating stuff, right? Just make sure you click on polygons. Most of our stuff we'll be doing is polygon based. Usually 1,000,000 divisions means it's polygons. All right, so over here in the channel box, we have Translate Y. We set that to 1. That works, right? We have our rotates. We have our scales just like we would inside of Cinema. Further down, we have this area called Inputs. And this is another one of the differences between Maya and Cinema, is that everything that we do inside Maya, Maya will save for us, okay? If I click on the Polysphere 1, I get all of these different options here for what that sphere looks like. Let me jump back to Cinema so we can see this. Oops. If I click on the sphere, before I've hit C on it, I have the radius and I have segments and I have this kind of type standard, or I can change the division type on there. Okay. Maya, that doesn't matter. I can keep that area on the right pretty much until I'm done with the file if I wanted to. In Cinema, the second I want to do anything fancy to it, like edit the points, I have to hit C first and then do that. Maya doesn't care. That area on the right will actually fill up with stuff the more things we do to the surface, okay? So this isn't a modeling class. I'll show you some basic modeling things. But let's say I went to right-click and went to vertices, faces, and I grabbed these faces and I extruded them and pulled them out. And then I right-clicked and went back to object mode. You'll see here, there's the extrude, there's a sphere. If you remember from Cinema, the second you are done with a tool, it's gone. You can't go back and edit it. In Maya, you can. I can click on that extrude. I can find where the Translate Z is I just did here, and I can change that number. Okay? Now you can do that for some distance. If I did another extrude, another extrude, another extrude, another extrude, I might be able to go 2 or 3 or 4 extrudes down. but there's sometimes you'll hit a limit. If I pull this up, let's say I just put that to 1. If I try to go back down to this polysphere and I change the subdivisions, oops, you'll see that the shape totally changes, okay? Because Maya's remembering you grabbed faces 1 through 50 and then you extruded those faces out. The second I added different divisions, that changed the numbers, which then changed which faces got extruded, okay? Something to pay attention to. For what we're doing initially, it's not going to be a huge deal, okay? I just want to show you that. Cool, we'll leave that. We need to play with other views, okay? Whenever we're animating, we want to make sure that we don't accidentally start animating this going in some crazy sideways direction. Anytime we animate something like a sphere moving from left to right, up and down, whatever, we want to make sure we're locked into that view, okay? So a couple different ways we can switch views. If you tap the space bar, this will pull you into your multiple views. Bottom of each one, you'll see the name, perspective, top, front, and side, okay? Maya is mouse sensitive, so if I just move my mouse over any one of these windows and tap the space bar again, it will jump me back into that window, okay? So I tap the space bar, tap the space bar. That's one way to get in between all these different views. Another way is up here under panels. This is the slow way. Panels, orthographic, front, side, and top are all orthographic views. There's no distortion or perspective to it. And then I could switch to front, side, or top this way. Or I can go back to perspective and go to perspective. If I'm doing a stereoscopic rendering, I want to render out the left eye and the right eye and use my 3D glasses on them, I can make a 3D stereo camera right here, and then my animation would actually have the right eye and the left eye, which can then be viewed, and I can actually see those, okay? And then there's other stuff down here that you can change this whole layout if you want it. So that's the slow way. I don't recommend going that way at all. This is the recommended way. Hold the space bar down in your perspective window. This is every single menu that's inside Maya, okay? Not every menu, but most of them. All those menu bars at the top, each one of those is a separate one of these lines. Now, there's hidden menus all over Maya. If I, this is the word Maya, obviously. If I click and hold on the left of that, that brings up one menu. If I click and hold on the other side of that, that brings up another menu. If I click and hold up here, that's a different menu. If I click and hold down here, that's a different menu, okay? So you'll see these things literally all over Maya where we're popping into these menus. Again, one of the reasons the interface is so strong is because you can do this stuff. And not only can you use those, you can create those. So if I wanted to make my own menu every time I go up here and I go whatever this is, I can do that for my own if I wanted. I can make my own hotkey, hold down the left mouse button, and that will bring up my own menu if I wanted to, okay? So I'm going to click and hold, and then I'm going to click and hold on Maya, and then you'll see perspective, left, top, back, front, bottom, right, new camera, and I will go to, in this case, the front view, I think. Nope, it's the right view. Oh, I haven't moved it away, so it's either view right now. So it's either front or right. All right, I'm going to go to right. There we go. So I'm going to go to the right view. Okay, now it doesn't matter how we get here. I want to show you multiple ways because when you see someone working, when I'm working, you won't even have to look. You can just kind of know exactly which menu you're going to by that quick clicking from one spot to the next. Okay? So just get used to that because you'll find it an enormous time saver. All right, so now we should be in a side view, an orthographic view. We can only move the ball right now left and right, up and down. We can't change the depth of it, okay? So we're going to slide the ball back. I'm going to grab the blue arrow and pull it back. Watching my translate here, bring it to about 12. There we go. Okay, so move your ball to about 12. Doesn't have to be exact, just close. The Move Tools hotkey is E inside of Maya. Nope, I lied. It's W inside Maya. See, I'm already in Cinema. In Cinema, the hotkey is E. Now, annoying thing, and we'll get to it when we need to rotate, but rotate inside of Cinema is R, rotate inside of Maya is E. Scale inside of Cinema is T. Scale inside of Maya is R. Okay, so as long as you know it's that top arrow, Q, W, E, R, those T, that area, you should be good, okay? I do it all the time where I'm like, nope, yep, that's the one I want. Okay? All right. So we've set our object up. This is where we want to start the ball moving, okay? We're going to set keyframes. In Cinema, we click the circle, it sets a keyframe, right? In Maya, there's 100 ways to set keyframes. We're going to do them several different ways, okay? First way, we're going to do it the absolute horrible way, and then we'll see why we're doing it the absolute horrible way afterwards. So the absolute horrible way is we hit S. Okay? So we've clicked on the sphere, we've hit S. Tell me what changed inside of our screen. Yep, so two things, right? The red box is on the right, and then the red line right there. Okay? So those are the two things that will typically happen when we animate something, okay? We hit S, it lights up. Now, down here is our ticker. Move your ticker off of frame 1. And then tell me what the channel box looks like now. What happened to it? It turned pink, okay? So what do you think dark red means? The keyframe, right? So we have a keyframe on that frame. That's what it means. So anytime we see that dark red, that's our indicator that the frame that we're currently on has a keyframe, okay? So as we slide it back, it's dark red, we see the keyframe. As we come off of it, it's pink, we don't have a keyframe there. Now, that's going to be important for most animations that we do. Most of the time, we're never going to set a keyframe in the exact spot we need it. Sometimes we need to go back to that spot, adjust the timing. And if we are frame off, that means that we're setting two keyframes very close to each other, which will make everything explode, okay? So that's where we started, is at frame 1. Now, we've had animation before. We had it inside Cinema. Has anyone here not had After Effects before? 1, 2, okay. 3, 4. I shouldn't have looked over there. Too many. It's not a big deal. It's still animation regardless of what we're using. Okay? Animation works. We have a start frame and we have an end frame. Every action is the same exact thing. Okay? So when you look at a character and they're walking, you have a lot of start and end frames. Their thigh has a start point here and then an end point there. And then you have another cycle of it starting here and then ending there. So as long as you can get the start and end philosophy under wraps, you should be good. So the ball is going to start here, and we're going to have it just move across the screen. Okay, we're not doing any bouncing yet. So it's going to move from the left side of my screen to the right side of my screen. Looking at my right side of my screen over here, it says 24 FPS. Any guesses what that is? Frames per second. Excellent. Okay. So 24 frames per second is what we have. So if I wanted this thing to take 3 seconds, what frame am I going to go to? 72. Okay. So 24, 48, 72. As an animator, you'll have those things kind of locked in as you start animating stuff. Everything is arbitrary. So even though I'm saying 3 seconds, that means nothing. If the ball's going to go super fast, that might be too slow. If the ball's going to go super slow, that might not be enough time, okay? So we're just going to do it at 3 seconds. So we're going to slide our ticker down here to 72. Okay, the ball didn't move, right? Right. So now we have to move the ball, so we're going to grab just the blue arrow and slide it across the screen. Did our channel box, did those turn bright red? No. So what does that mean? Right, we need to set a keyframe. If you've used After Effects before, After Effects has auto key. Every time you change a value, it'll set a key for those items. Okay? Maya does not. Okay, it does have it, we just don't use it. All right? So every time we want to set a key, we adjust our time, adjust the property, and then we hit what letter to set a key? S. Okay? And then we can verify it's all red. We verify the little tick mark at the bottom, and then we can hit play. Do you want the easy way to hit play or the slow way to hit play? Easy. Alt-V. Okay. Now, yours might be going super fast. Yours might be going super slow. Why do you think one is going faster than the other? If you look around the room, you can see that some are going really fast and some are going really slow. Nope. Nope, they're all 72 frames. No, because we're really moving at the same distance across the screen. It's actually the speed at which it's playing back the frames. Okay? So even though the bottom right says 24 frames per second, that's what our animation is set to. But when we hit play, it's playing it back on the fast screens as fast as it can play it back. On my screen, it's playing it back in real time. Okay? So I'm going to hit stop so I can hit escape or Alt-V again. I'm going to right-click in my timeline, go to playback speed, and just make sure that it's set to real time in your timeline. Okay, so just right-click anywhere in your timeline, playback speed, and then just make sure it's on real time. If you're playing back at a regular speed. Much better? Okay. Some people will do their entire ball animation at the wrong speed, and they will turn it in, and it will be going super slow, or it'll be going 10 times faster than they expected because they weren't looking at it in real time. Okay? So you always want to make sure that whatever you're viewing is as close to what the end result is as possible. Sometimes that's not possible to even do. When we do a full character, the character is going to move slow. So there's other ways we'll actually export out a sequence where we can see it in real time. All right? Cool. So let's stop our animation. I'm going to grab the ball again. And then I'm gonna show something. You don't do this. Okay. So I'm going to accidentally grab vertices and do this and then set a key. I'm going to go up to 72. I'm going to slide this across. I'm going to set a key again there. Back to object mode. Hit play. And do we see a huge difference in the animation? No, right? They're doing pretty much the same thing. Okay? Now, the difference is here, I only set keyframes for the actual object itself. Okay? And how many objects did I have selected? One. Here, I grabbed every single one of the vertices and set keyframes. How many objects is that? A whole lot, right. So in a second, we'll see how messy that's going to be. Another thing to pay attention to, this one here, let's say I want to rotate it. I can switch to rotate and I can still rotate it. But this one, if I click on it, its pivot is way over here. Because I moved just the points, the pivot doesn't go with it, so the pivot stays way back there. And I may not realize that when I'm way back here and it looks like it works. As this is moving, that pivot just stays in the exact spot. Okay, again, stuff that past students have done, you just want to be aware of it. If you do that, the only fix is either delete it or delete the keyframes and redo it. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at this and see what this is going to look like in our graph editor. Okay? If you've used After Effects before, we have a thing called the speed graph, and we have a thing called the value graph. Maya has the value graph. That's what it focuses its stuff on. If you didn't do the shelf, you can go to Window, Animation Editor's graph editor. If you did do the shelf, then you can click on your graph editor, which I believe is this blank icon for me for some reason. It is, yep. Yep, so it's the same thing as just the animation curve.
So it's Windows.
Animation Editor,
Okay.
and then graph editor. Now, as we have two screens here, for you, I would recommend taking your graph, throw it on the other screen, okay? That way you can always keep it up. As you're tweaking stuff on your graph, you can see what it looks like on the other side, okay? Otherwise, we're constantly moving it out of the way or closing it and reopening it. All right, so this doesn't look too bad. We can pretty much see exactly what's happening. This blue curve right here in the middle, that's our translate Z. That's it moving from one side to the other, okay? If I didn't know that that was translate Z, do you think there's anything in here that's indicating that that might be a Z direction? Blue, right? So if we remember from Cinema, red, green, blue, RGB is XYZ. Same thing in Maya. Those things are kind of universal across the board. We don't know if it's rotate. We don't know if it's scale. We do know that it is a Z, though. On the left, we see all the different properties that we've animated. How many did we actually animate and move? One, right? But all this other junk comes in there too. This is why hitting S is not recommended, because we get all this other stuff. Now here we've only set 2 keyframes at the start and the end. If we had a whole animation of the ball moving around, every one of these items would have their own curve, their own graph, their own stuff going on. And you could end up with way too much stuff happening inside your scene, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all the other junk. So just marquee in the middle of these other ones, not the blue one, and then hit delete. Make sure your ball is selected also. If your ball isn't selected, it won't show up anything in there. And if you're you're not zoomed into the correct amount, all your hotkeys still work, so you can hit F, frame it, zoom into it, okay? So that gets rid of all those other ones. When we get back into Maya, we'll see what it looks like on the other stuff. Now, this is one graph, one curve, one item. Let me grab my points on the other one, and let's just see what madness we have here. There we go. So there we go. Every single one of these items is then animated. There's 381 points that I've animated doing it the wrong way, which obviously means that Maya is going to have to think a lot longer and process, and other stuff won't work, okay? So I'm just going to delete that. Back to the graph editor. Okay, so the graph editor is one of those tools that it will take you some time to get used to. If you remember in After Effects class when you had it, the speed graph was basically controlling the speed of things. Where is it fast? Where is it slow? The value graph is controlling the value of that specific item. Okay, so this is translate Z. At the top of it, it's there. The other side, it's there. And in the middle, it's doing some kind of movement. The biggest thing that people have a hard time understanding is where is it slowing down? Where is it speeding up? So where do you think that it's slowing down? Right, the beginning and the end, okay? Just like After Effects, we would have easy ease, so it ease out of keyframes, ease into keyframes, that kind of thing. The middle is the fastest. Now, if I click on this button, what is that going to do to it? Constant speed, right? So this is linear, meaning that it's going to move the same exact speed the entire time. Does anyone know any objects that move at the same exact speed the entire time? Right. Most objects don't do that. Okay. Most objects have some kind of ramping up, some kind of slowing down. Right. So I'm going to switch this back to flat tangents, which gives me this. Now, one of the great things in Maya is that we're able to do so much tweaking on these in order to get them to do what we want them to do. Okay. It does have a million options right here. And it does have some things that we have to do in order to be able to tweak it. So you would think, and this is one of my gripes, I'd be able to click on this handle and drag it out like I would in any other software, but you cannot drag it out, okay? I have to do a couple things and then I can drag it out, all right? So I'm gonna drag the middle of this bar just to select the whole thing. Okay, I want the whole graph. I'm gonna go to tangents, and I'm gonna say free tangent weight. I'm sorry, wrong one, wrong order. I'm gonna go to curves first and go to weighted tangents. There we go. So go to curves and go to weighted tangents. And then I'm gonna go to tangents, free tangent weight. And now I should be able to grab the handlebar and then click and drag it. And grab this handlebar and click and drag it. Now it does take some fancy work just to even select the handlebars, okay? In After Effects, Illustrator, whatever, you can just kind of grab them. And here we have to select them first. So I marquee the point, marquee the handlebar, then very closely I have to click and then I can drag it. There it goes. Marquee the point, marquee the handlebar, and then I can click and drag it. Come on. Right.
One more time, it was curves and then weighted tangents?
Yep. And then tangents, free tangent weight. Under tangents here, and then free tangent weight. Yep. Now you can do this on a per handle basis, so I can do it to only one handle if I wanted to. But typically I just grab the whole curve, do weighted tangents, go to tangents, free tangent weight. Okay? So I'm just kind of screwing with this curve a little bit. What do you think that curve is going to do when we hit play? Yeah, super slow, right? Like barely any movement, and then boom, it's going to smack into there. So let's see if we're right. It's pretty quick. Not as quick as I was expecting, but pretty quick. Cool. All right. So you'll get more comfortable with these as you go. Come on. I think every year they come out with a new version of Maya, they just make it harder to select those handles. Right. That's exactly what it is. There we go. Let's scoot that back over. All right. So now this is going to do the opposite. Super fast and then super slow. Right? Everything we're doing with our animation, we have to understand what the motion should be doing. Okay? It's not just about setting keyframes and letting the software do the work, because the software just doesn't know. It's about understanding where should it be fast, where should it be slow, where are the transitions, and how are those things moving. Another point of note when we're doing this, you guys have seen Ghostbusters, Don't Cross Your Streams, right? Old-fashioned Ghostbusters. We never cross our keyframe, okay? So we never want to go past our keyframe and then come back to it. Because what we're doing is we're setting a limit on there that is not something that we've set. We're allowing it to go past the item. This is basically going past this keyframe here and then coming back to it. If I wanted to go this far, I should have a keyframe right there, okay? I should drag this right to this spot, and then I should put a keyframe there. That way I have a lot more control over this point. Whoops. Because as an animator, it's all about being able to control these things from one spot to the next. Now, there are some instances maybe it doesn't need it or whatever. Just good habit to have. All right. So let's delete that sphere. Let's make a new one. Okay, so delete the sphere, make a new polygon sphere under Create Polygon Primitive Sphere. Nope. Now I will show you, remember I said we can customize everything in Maya, right? So this is the script editor where basically everything that we're doing is actually being echoed out into a command line. This is the line that just created that sphere. This is the line that set that polygon sphere's attribute to 1. So I'm just going to copy these. I'm just going to middle drag this into my shelf. Yes, as Mel. I'm going to delete the sphere, and then I click the button, and there it is. Okay? Again, one of the great things about Maya is literally if you have a bunch of commands, you can stack the commands, throw it into your shelf, and use it later. Now, this is Polygon Sphere 1. This script only works for Polygon Sphere 1. The second I click it again, Polygon Sphere 2 doesn't move to that spot because that's number 2. There are ways to configure it so that it would create a sphere, this name, and then move it up. I don't want that there, though. It's messy. All right. Cool. So we moved it from left to right, right? So that's our practice for that. Let's reset this back to 1. So we're back at the start of this. Usually we forget, new animators forget to reset your time back to 1. So we know how to move something left or right. Now let's make something bounce, okay? We're going to move it up, move it down, okay? So where should the bounce start at? The ground, yeah. There's no trick answer there. Okay. Now, we talked about being OCD. We talked about wanting things a certain way. Having my translate Y set to 1 at the start of that is not something I like to do. I like to start off with everything nice and clean and fresh. So I want my translate Y to be back at 0. If I put it to 0, it goes back down to there. Okay? So that doesn't work. I can't just set that to 0. I want to reset this and tell Maya that this is my new starting point. Okay? So I'm going to go to Modify Freeze Transformations. Okay, that's one of the shelf items that I mentioned adding because it's something that we will use a lot. Okay, and what this does is I've moved it so it's on the ground. I've frozen the transforms. Now they're all back to 0 and he's sitting on the ground. Okay, if I needed to do that again because I messed up, I could just move that again, hit freeze transform, oops, and now it's frozen again. Or move it to wherever it should be. Freeze transform, and now it's there again. Okay? You can do that 15 times, 20 times. I can delete the sphere, make it again, freeze my transform, and we're good to go. Okay? So a lot of these things you'll just do over and over and over again. All right. So he's going to start on the ground at 0, and he's going to bounce up. Jordan told us where he's going to start. So now we're going to set a keyframe on Translate Y only, okay? So we're going to click on Translate Y. Then we're going to right-click on Translate Y. And then we're going to key only the selected item. Okay, so now we've set a keyframe on just one single property. We still have the red ticker. That item turned bright red. We're good. Another indicator at the bottom here says result : 1. That means it's set one keyframe. When we get into characters, we're going to set keyframes and it'll say result 400 or something because we have to set keyframes on a whole bunch of stuff. All right, so how long is it going to take for it to go from the bottom to the top? As long as I want. So it's a bounce, it's not a float, right? So it should happen relatively quick. So let's say 15 frames, okay? So we go up to 15 frames, raise the ball to where it's supposed to be, and then key select it again. All right, so we have the same process over and over and over again. You want it to be a little bit easier. I'm going to show you how we can make it a little bit easier, okay? So if we look at something like this animation, we basically have a repetition of keyframes, right? 1, 30, 60, 90, and 120, the ball is always on the ground. 15, 45, 75, and 105, the ball is always in the air, okay? It's always floating. So I'm going to hit stop. You don't have to do this part. I'm just going to show you how to do it, just so you can be upset that it took you that long to do yours. So I'm going to go here at Translate Y. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to go to 30. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to go to 60. Oops. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to go to 90. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to go to 120, and I'm going to set a key. So I just set all the keyframes for it being on the ground. Then I'm just going to cut that in the middle and scooch this up, and then set another key. Now, if I were to click here, it goes back down, right? And then I would have to, like a caveman, drag it back up. Left clicking updates your timeline. Middle clicking does not update your timeline, your viewport. So if I left click and drag, I can preview this. But if I middle click and drag, it just moves my time slider. So if I go to middle click by 75 and then key selected, and then middle click at 105 and then key selected, I've basically done the exact same thing. I've just kind of shortcutted that process, okay? Now, this is going to drive me crazy, and I really hate moving my mouse any more than I have to. Constantly switching back and forth between my timeline and that thing to do the key selected drives me nuts. So we're going to do this thing right now, so I don't have to worry about that. Go to one of your keyframes, so go to 1, 20, whatever your keyframes are at, I don't care which one. Click on your Translate Y. Okay. The word Translate Y, this is two different things. When I click this, that doesn't do the same thing as me clicking on the word Translate Y. So make sure you click on the word Translate Y. Then I'm going to go to Key, Set Key, and I'm going to go to this thing on the far right. That's the option box for it, okay? Now, whenever we hit S, it runs this command Set Key. Whatever options we have set for that set key are right here. So I'm going to change it. Instead of saying set key and it sets everything, I'm going to have it only set keyframes on what's selected, okay? So if I say all keyable attributes from channel box, that means it'll only set keyframes for whatever's highlighted. So now I can hit set key at the bottom. And now if I were to go to, let's say, 15 and hit S, and 30 and hit S, and 45 and hit S, you'll see that it only sets keys for what I have highlighted there. Okay? Again, it's a huge time saver because I don't have to constantly jump back and forth to do those things. Now, I will show you one more way that can upset you, because I like to do that, right? So let's delete that. Let's reset this back to 0. On my timeline, shift middle click if we don't want to update the time, or shift right click if we do want to update the time. This is one of the cool things. We can scale things together, move things apart, move whole chunks of data if we need to. All right, so this is how an animator would animate a sphere, okay, bouncing up and down. They would set one keyframe, so I'm going to set one keyframe on the Translate Y, which is right here. And then the rest of the work would be done right inside here. They're not even looking at what's happening inside the view because they know what's going to happen. Then they're going to go over here to the Insert Key tool, and then they're going to say, okay, this is 15, it'll be up here. Oops. Come on. Whatever. And 30's here, and then 45, and then 60, and then 75, 90, 105, 120. And then I can grab every other one of these and then just move it up. Okay? So that's typically how they're going to do their stuff because they know exactly what they're looking for. This is actually way too low also. This is only like barely off the ground. Look how far it's going to move. So I really need to ramp that up and grab these and go higher. There we go. Yeah, still not, man. 20, is that what I was at? I don't think it was that high. I guess I was. All right. And then I'm also going to grab these. Everything's good there. Cool. I'm just going to double check my values. Up at the top here, it'll show you the frame, and then it'll show you the value. So I'm just making sure that these are at the right frames. Not that it matters for what we're doing, but I just want to be at the same spot that you guys are. 60, 75, 80, 105, and 20. Okay. So again, there's more ways to do that. We could also copy and paste keyframes. That's something you can do. If I have one chunk, I can copy and paste those as well. All right, let's get that here. All right, good. Yes, sir.
When you copy and paste on your timeline, do you have to highlight both keyframes?
Yes, we would have to highlight them. So like he was asking, how do I highlight keyframes? I would shift, drag, and I can copy it. Most of the time, I'm not going to copy a big chunk here. I would go into another area and adjust that, okay? Which is where we're going to go next. So if this is a bouncing ball, we have a couple things that we have to be concerned about. Number one, does it look like it's actually bouncing? No, right? Why doesn't it look like it's bouncing? It's not at a constant, it looks like it, but it's not. It's actually slowing down before it hits the ground.
Same distance.
The same distance too, yep. So it's always doing this like slow in, slow out. We're always going the same height for each one of those. So we really need to adjust a lot of the features of this. So one thing we can do that'll really make this shine as an animation is we're going to go back to the graph editor. So if you closed it, window, animation editor, graph editor. If not, you can just go to it. So we talked about this a minute ago. Where is the ball slowing down that it shouldn't be slowing down? Right before it hits the ground and while it's rising, right? So the ball's fastest spots are right by the ground, okay? If it was anywhere else, the ball, like if the fastest spot of the ball was way up here, it would just keep going, okay? It wouldn't stop. So the fastest parts of the ball moving are going to happen all right here at the bottom, okay? So I'm going to marquee all these points at the bottom, and then I'm going to click that linear button, which is way up here at the top. Okay, now what that does is it gets rid of any of that softness, any of that easing into those keyframes. And then if I scooch this over to the other screen and we hit play, okay, so now it feels just a hair better than it did, okay, a hair, not much, but a hair. All right, so how can we enhance that effect? Because we have it, right, we have, it's hitting the ground and kind of bouncing off of there, but I want to exaggerate it so that the viewer gets the idea a little bit better. So there's several things I can do. List some or name some that you think we should do. We could squish the sphere, but we're not there yet. We should be able to, at this point, still get the idea that we're making a good impact with the ground, okay, before we even get to that level.
Start staggering the height that it bounces up to, so it's like lower and lower.
Mm-hmm.
It loses energy.
Yep, well, that's something too, okay? There's one more thing that we should do here. What about exaggerating the width of that? What if I took those bars at the top and instead of being so like pointy, I rounded them off more? That way, as the ball's coming up, it's basically shooting up, hanging out a lot longer, and then flying down, okay? That's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna grab all my keyframes. And remember, we have to do the weighted tangents under curves. And then we have to go to tangents and free the tangent weights. Okay? Those two things will then allow me to grab these handlebars and stretch these out some. Actually, I'm going to grab the top ones, I think. Just grab this and just stretch that we go. Okay. Now, if you end up with some weird, like, you're zoomed out here, don't try to work like this. Click off, hit F, frame yourself so you can see the entire graph. Make your graph as big as you can. The bigger the graph is, the easier it's going to be to tweak a lot of this stuff. Now, a couple things, again, shortcuts. We always like shortcuts. I'm just going to reset all my stuff back to where it was. Okay, that's where all of my stuff was. I'm going to grab all my keyframes at the bottom, make them linear. Grab all these here. I've already done the weighted tangent stuff, so that's already set. But if I grab all of these at the same time and click and drag on one of them, you can see how all of them will move. Okay, so that's, again, another way to kind of save time. Now, looking at some of the stuff of, what would happen if we went too far, right? Or if we had this at an angle. Sometimes you want to look at those things just to see where the limits are. How far can you push something before it doesn't work? This is going to look horrible, but just for fun, let's see what it does. There you go. So now, if we were looking at this kind of animation, what does it look like it's doing? Right, but it also looks like it's kind of like throwing itself down, right? It doesn't have a sense of, it's bouncing and floating and then gradually picking up speed, right? So that's what that graph does. Let's switch this. Oh, come on. Let's switch this to the other way, and then let's see what that looks like. And now we have this other thing where it's like shooting up and then floating very slowly down. And again, something you want to pay attention to because sometimes you might need this for some kind of animation, okay? I'm just going to reset this so that it is back to being like that. Okay. All right. Now, it still looks kind of funky, like it doesn't look perfect yet. Part of that is what we mentioned before, the spacing between all of them, adding squashing and stretching we would do, adding different heights would also change. But what I need to fix right now is this. Oops, moving stuff around. This handlebar here at the bottom is still kind of going outward, and so we're getting this thing where the ball is moving at a pretty gradual pace, but then there's a spot where it kind of like slows down and then speeds up again. It's probably happening right around here. So what I want to do is I want to take these bars and I want to angle them up more so I really exaggerate this like bouncing down. Every animation we do is going to have this amount of finesse to it where we're bouncing between all of these different keyframes and stuff to get it set up. So if I were to grab one of these handlebars and try to move it, you can see how it moves both of them. If we were in After Effects, we would break the tangents. That's what we're going to do here. Different hotkeys or different keys. This one is one of the horribly labeled ones up here at the top that says break tangents. There's 2 squiggly lines and 2 arrows. It's the one to the right of it. Okay, so I'm just going to grab these and hit break tangents on those. And then I should be able to kind of smooth that transition out. Now, if you watch where I'm putting my handlebar, look how it lines up pretty much with where that graph is. I'm going to do this throughout all of these. All right, so this looks like it's pretty good. If we look at this animation, it feels nice and smooth. It feels like the fastest parts are right at the bottom where it hits and goes up. Okay? Now, this is, like we said, it's a loop. All my heights are the same, all my bottoms are the same, all of my animation is basically the same animation over and over again. So we do want to do some changes to how the height of this is moving, okay? So I'm going to hit stop on this. Looking at this first hill right here, this is the highest it's going to get. Or as something bounces, does it get higher as it bounces? Right. It gets lower every time it bounces, unless it has its own energy force, and then it can control how it bounces, right? So we're going to assume in this case that it doesn't, and it's going to gradually get lower. So this will be the height of it. Every mountain after this, I'm calling these mountains, or you can call them hills, should look exactly the same proportionate-wise, but it should be shorter and narrower, right? Watch what I do to mine as a mistake. So I'm going to do this because it's shorter. I'm going to do that, and then I will do this. So now they're all gradually smaller as I hit play. The first one's good. That one's okay. What's happening? And then I don't know what's there. Okay? Even if we were to tweak the tangents, as the ball is moving up a certain amount and coming back down, that's essentially 30 frames. The next one shouldn't take 30 frames also. The next one should be less time. And the next one should be less time. Okay? So as we move these hills down, we should also be grabbing all of these and moving it over. This is where it's going to get a little bit tricky because we have to use multiple keys to do this. So I need to marquee all the points here. I need to hold down Shift, and I need to use my middle mouse to drag leftwise. And then I'm going to have to go back afterwards and fix all my tangents again. So just be prepared for that as well.
So is everything supposed to explode when we try this?
It might. As long as there's no debris in the way, I think we're going to be good. You just grab them, hold Shift, and middle drag. Yep. Middle drag, yes. All right, now I'm going to do some other stuff to mine. Again, don't worry about doing, don't try to follow along at this point because I'm going to go faster just so you can see this. But I want you to see how all of these things that we're doing are building up to the end of it, okay? So our first thing that we did before we did the bouncing is we animated it going left or right? So I'm going to do that. Because we only have keyframes on the translate Y, I can move this anywhere that I want to, and it'll still work. So it'll work here, it'll work there, and nothing will change that. And that's, again, one of the reasons that we only set kind of one keyframe at a time, or one attribute. So if I were to go way over here and set a translate Z keyframe, and then I scooched up to about there, and slid this over some, and set another translate Z keyframe, then we would get the ball bouncing across the screen, okay? Now looking at how the ball moves from A to B, we have to think about the physics. Every time we're animating something or posing a character or any of that, always think about in real world what would this be doing, okay? So if this ball is bouncing, where should the most motion happen going from left to right? At the beginning, right? Because that's the biggest hill. All of that should be going that way. So I'm going to go into my graph editor. This is why your graph is so important to look at it correctly. This doesn't look so bad. But when I go like this, we can really see how steep that is, okay? So this should be the most movement, which means that this is going to be like that, okay? So lots of movement here, very little movement there. So we'll see if that actually works. Okay, so that seems like that would be an appropriate amount of movement going forward. Now, if the ball only moved up a little bit, that might look weird. If it moved up a lot, that might not be enough. You really have to be able to look at it and say, does this feel realistic? Sometimes you have to wash your eyes out by leaving the room, looking at other stuff, coming back, and then looking at your animation and see. Because you looking at the same frames over and over and over again, you just kind of like get it burned in that, you know, it's the same thing and you haven't changed anything. Sometimes animators will also watch their stuff backwards just so they get an idea of what's happening the other direction, right? And this also, again, kind of cleanses what we're used to seeing so that, you know, when we watch it forward, we are looking at it with somewhat fresh eyes, okay? Cool. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that specific ball for today's bouncing ball. It really does cover a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing in this class. I do want to note that some of these are obviously more prevalent in our bouncing ball than others. Certain things we're really not going to have a lot of other things happening, like secondary action on the bouncing ball. We really wouldn't have that kind of thing. The bouncing ball is going to be doing its own thing. We will have squash and stretch, right? Stretch. We will have anticipation. We will have staging. When it talks about straight ahead and pose to pose, in this case, we're really talking about what we've already done, which is what kind of animation? No, pose to pose. The ball's here, the ball's there, right? When we saw that foxtail on that Animation Mentor one, they probably did it like pose to pose with the ball and then straight ahead with the foxtail, right? Or posing afterwards. We will have some follow through. We will have slow in and slow out. We will have arcs. We will be dealing with timing. I'm going to put a question mark for the exaggeration. It really depends on what kind of animation we have. We could do something very straightforward, not a whole lot of exaggeration. Sometimes we really want it. Some things we have to translate. So things like solid drawing. In his, obviously, he was talking about physically drawing or illustrating your cartoons. In 3D, we really have to talk about the lights, the colors, the shape of our objects, what else is in the scene, as to what we're able to see. When we have this bouncing ball like this, and we're not there yet, but I'm just going to throw some different materials on here. Standard surface. So I'm going to make this hideous blue here. I'm going to throw in a ground plane. I'm going to make this a hideous green. There we go. And then I'm going to throw in a light. And I'll shoot it from that way. And then let's just see how horrible this is. Oops, I need more intensity. There we go. All right, so solid drawing, this is not really solid drawing. All of these things are really difficult to look at. We're seeing a lot of brightness here. It's really detracting from the ball there. The blackness here, we're really losing it. So as we choose colors, materials, lights, all of that kind of stuff and bring those together, we have to figure out the best way to show off that animation, okay? Students in the past have, let's say they found an image that they made, they put it on as a background, you can't even see the ball bouncing so much because the ball is super dark, the background is super dark, and they're just kind of mingling with each other. So we have to be just aware of that kind of thing. And then obviously the appeal, how interesting is your animation, okay? That's something that across the board, every animation that we do, we should be looking at. So for next week, last class I told you to go ahead and start sketching out your ideas for what you want your bouncing ball to do. Now I want you to take your drawing, figure out which one of your drawings is going to be like, this is the one I want to do, and go through and figure out where the squashing and stretch is going to happen, figure out where the anticipation is going to happen, look at the staging of how you want to stage this, okay? Think of previs, think of storyboarding of how you want to tell the story about your ball. In this case, let me just delete the light, and I guess I'll leave this horrible ground there for now. As I hit play, you can see how this ball is going across the screen. If I wanted to show the entire ball in the entire animation, I have to be pretty far back. And again, that goes into that solid drawing because now it might be too small to even see what's going on because it's so far away. On the other hand, if I were to, let's say, put the ball here, and I'm going to grab my camera, I'm going to set some keys, go to the end of this. And this is horrible camera 101. Go back up here. All right. So this is horrible staging, right? Because I'm following the ball, it's moving too much, it's all over the place, okay? So if I want to be close to the ball, maybe I want to find some spots where I can be close to the ball, still have the ball in frame, and still do, you know, these kind of cool looking angles. So maybe I would have my a camera angle back here, or up here, let's say. All right, where are you bouncing? Right there. Let me get this other camera out of here so I don't see that. Okay, so maybe I have a camera that's like way over here, kind of angling to shoot the ball from this angle, right? Oops. Or from this angle. Let's go further back. There we go. Right, and then maybe at the same time I'd have another camera on this side that's going to catch the ball coming in. And then I have another camera that is off to the side that's showing the ball doing its bounces from the side. So we can do multiple cameras, render out multiple cameras, and edit it together just like we would have a film, okay? Especially when our move is very complex, you need to have those extra cameras in there to catch it. There's just sometimes too much going on for this side camera to catch everything and still have it look good, okay? So go through, figure out where your squashing, your anticipation, your staging is going to be, figure out where the follow-through is going to be. Most likely, after the ball is done with its initial bounces, that follow-through is just it bouncing and rolling a little bit more. Or as it hits an area, it might kind of wobble a little bit going forward. Where is it slow? Where is it fast? Where are your arcs at? Look at the timing. Look at the solid drawing. You can kind of get a color palette. I think we talked about that before, trying to look at, I think we mentioned Pinterest. Was it this class we talked about that or last class? We did talk about Pinterest, okay. Yeah, so looking at different color palettes that you would want for your stuff. Colors, under. Right? So stuff like this, these bright, vibrant colors may be something that you want in your scene. If I were to take, let's say, this ball here and I were to animate it rolling, would we see that rolling? Why not?
There's nothing to contrast with the rotation.
Exactly, right? So what would we put on there to get it to so we can see that it's rolling?
Simple stripe.
Right, we can do that. We can do a simple stripe. You can do a texture like that. Oops, don't put that in there yet. Whatever this is, these little patterns on here, we could do. Oops, those are kind of cool there. Okay, so think about that kind of thing too. What kind of materials, and then the appeal. Just how interesting is your animation? Okay, it's a bouncing ball. There's not a whole lot of interest we're going to have to this. This isn't Toy Story. It's our first assignment. But I want you to go through those drawings and plan out where the ball is going to be. Remember, our assignment is it should roll for 2 seconds, bounce at least 3 major times, okay? This is, let me zoom out so we can see it. 1, 2, 3, and then you'll see there's a little trailing one, and I probably put at least 1 more or 2 more trails on this just so it feels like it's stopping. And then we'll have 2 more seconds of bouncing after that, okay, or rolling. So 2 seconds of rolling, bounces, and then 2 more seconds of rolling, okay. That'll be for next week. When we come in, we're going to start the actual end ball bouncing one. We'll wipe this one out, we'll make a new one, and start over again, okay. Any questions on that? No?